All right, hello everybody. I'm Madeline, and today I'm going to be doing a movie review for Pure O, which was written and directed by Dylan Tucker and stars Cooper, a rehab therapist or a rehab counselor, sorry, who is struggling with his mental health, gets an OCD diagnosis, specifically a kind of branch of OCD called Pure O, where he struggles with a lot of obsessive thoughts more than he does like compulsions to kind of quell those thoughts, or at least as far as what we're shown, that's how it goes. I'm not an expert on Pure O, but I do have OCD. So watching this movie was really, really interesting to me. And I do have a lot of thoughts about how some things were portrayed, how like what was done well and what I think maybe I don't even want to say that it was done poorly because I have no idea what the experiences of the filmmakers are, and I'm kind of assuming that they know about OCD if they made this movie, but just things that like bugged me as a person with OCD. Um, and so, it's a common thing. I'm sure lots of people have different opinions about it, but I wanted to share mine just because it's my review, so I can. Um, anyways, and I did think this was a good movie. I want to preface that before I kind of shit on some of the things that really annoyed me. I really enjoyed this movie. It grew on me so much as it went on, and I was like tearing up by the end. Really fantastic. I think that it hit a lot of great emotional notes, but I'll get to that after. Something that really irritated me, and this is kind of, it's not a spoiler, it's more of a trope that this film used, was the trope of like this person who's struggling to find the right therapist at the beginning of their diagnosis journey, where they're kind of like a skeptic about like how to deal with your mental health. And I feel like it's kind of a recognizable thing in films. So the character starts out being like, how could I have OCD? I'm not some hypochondriac hand washing freak, which I absolutely am. So there's no shame in that game. Um, but anyways, he's like freaking out. He doesn't want to have OCD. He's sick of all these talk therapists. And he finally meets this therapist and he goes in there and he's like, okay, like why haven't you asked me about myself yet? And she kind of hits him with the like, well, look, why don't I just tell you about yourself even though I don't even know you because I know OCD and it's kind of all the same. And then she's like, it started with this, didn't it? And then it escalated to this. And then now you're feeling this and this and this. And he's like, oh my God, like this lady actually knows her stuff. Like she's telling me all these things that relate to me. That irritated me endlessly. The idea that like there's a therapist who can like come in and like know everything and kind of play God when it's like I feel like a really important part of um like reckoning with the fact that you have OCD when you first find out, or at least in my experiences. Again, I can only speak for my experiences here. And I'm not like I've had different levels of like manageableness and severity. Like personally over the years, it's never been at like an insanely critical level. So I'm really just speaking for like me. But I think that being able to talk to someone and like tell them what you're experiencing is like a really validating part of coming to diagnosis and like a comforting part. And it's good to feel heard by someone who like maybe can relate to it or like understand it and not think you're crazy. Because when I was young and I had some kind of OCD anxieties and I'd like explain to people how I was feeling without having any clue it was OCD, I'd often like think I was saying something relatable that everyone else felt and like be met with like crazy stares where they were like, what are you talking about? Like I remember at one point being young and being like, I just feel like there's some phases that everyone goes through in their life. Like at one point, everyone's really scared that like a murderer is going to break into their house. And my friends just kind of looked at me like, I don't think everybody gets really scared about that. And it's like, I know I'm not the only one who's ever felt that, but like, and you don't need OCD to feel that. But that was kind of when I was like, no, like it's normal. It's normal to check the door 10 times a night so that no one breaks into your house, guys. Like, right? Please tell me right. So like talking to a therapist and having them not talk over you and tell you that they know everything about you, like that's part of the experience. I thought that was like annoying. I thought that was very like, okay, so she's a cool therapist. She's not like other therapists. Got it. Awesome. And I thought that his therapist, who was my least favorite character, I really could not stand this therapist, kind of wanted to play God, and like say all these big statement model of things about OCD. Like she kept telling him, she's like, it doesn't matter what your thoughts are, They're just thoughts. And I was like, I guess in a way that could be constructive for someone with OCD to hear, but at the same time, it's also super invalidating because sometimes OCD makes you think some absolute batshit crazy things and they feel really real. And having someone tell you like, oh, that's not real, like it just sucks and it's ridiculous. Like for me, like I'm really worried about germs a lot. And so like I know that some of my compulsions like actually are kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, some of them are based in like real things. Like if I'm really nervous about using a chemical cleaner because I'm scared of both the germs and the chemicals, which is like kind of a contamination thing that lots of people have. And someone's like, well, you don't need to worry. I'm like, what? But these are like, this is like a hazardous chemical. And these are germs that could make me really sick. So if I'm getting really anxious about this, like, what do you mean, don't worry? And that they're just thoughts because these are real problems that I'm reacting to. So like, I don't know, I thought the therapist was just very dismissive of a lot of the things that people with OCD go through. And at some point, you need to like minimize the legitimacy of your OCD if you want to overcome it. But if for someone who's getting diagnosed for the first time, or maybe a film goer who's seeing like media about OCD for the first time, I was just like, this is just like a kind of cruel, unhelpful approach to come out like someone who's absolutely freaking out and like worried about their mental health with. So that really bothered me. And then I'm gonna stop this rant about OCD very shortly. I hope it's not like boring anyone out of their minds. But there was a scene where the therapist has Cooper bring in his girlfriend. And one of his primary fears, which I probably should have explained earlier, is that he is going to harm his girlfriend. That's like one of his OCD obsessions, not compulsions, obsessions, where he's really worried that he's gonna have a mental breakdown and kill his girlfriend and stab her. And that is like he doesn't want to. It's purely OCD saying like, what if you do this? What if you do this? Like you won't be able to stop yourself. You're gonna do this and then you'll spiral. And it's these kind of like 0 to 100 thoughts of like, oh, if you have one bad day, like what if you do this? And so it's really scary. And it's something that like he's not dealing with that, or like maybe okay, his issue having those thoughts doesn't only impact him, it also impacts his girlfriend because it impacts the relationship. His girlfriend's name is Emily, and she's played by Hope Lauren, or Lauren, sorry. Anyways, so he brings her into therapy kind of later in his journey, and they have to do this really kind of uncomfortable exercise. I don't want to give too much away. It's a very like intense scene, I thought, but it puts her in a really uncomfortable position. Like she has to kind of go out on a limb for him in a lot of ways throughout the film. Like again, as someone who has had OCD and who knows lots of people with OCD, can 100% sympathize for people who have to like deal with their loved ones when their OCD kind of makes them act really irrationally, um, or makes them really snappy, or makes them super, super anxious to be with. Like it's not necessarily an easy thing for loved ones to deal with. And I think that overall his girlfriend is like really supportive and understanding. And even when she like breaks in that, or if she's like prioritizing like her own stuff every now and then and can't be 100% available to him, I thought she did like a really good job being a supportive partner through this. And like it irritated me because his therapist kind of gave her some flack for it. Like she went into the appointment and was like, hey, thanks for being here. And the girlfriend's like, yeah, of course. And the therapist's like, well, not of course, because it's not like you've always been here. And I was like, whoa, you're about to ask her to do something insane in this appointment. How dare you speak to her like that? It's not easy to support loved ones with OCD. It can be really challenging no matter how much you love them, no matter, how kind of removed from fault that you may feel your loved one is because it's like a mental illness that's making them act like that. You know, you have to go easy on your loved ones sometimes when you have OCD. So those are my kind of primary issues with the treatment of OCD, is because I just hated that therapist. I hated her approach to everything. I thought she was very unkind to someone who's going through this difficult experience. But there were aspects of the OCD treatment that I really loved. I loved the group therapy sessions that the main character goes through when he needs to talk to other people about his OCD, because I found it really comforting to talk about my OCD with other people who had OCD, because even if it's not the same, like OCD can be so many different things. Like two people can have OCD and kind of not relate to it in any way, but lots of people can have OCD and there's like overlap between maybe some of their habits and the compulsions that they do, or it's just like sometimes it's just a funny thing to talk about, or sometimes it's just like, oh, listen to like how bizarre whatever my OCD's freaking me out about has made me do. So I really liked the way that characters related to each other and showed a lot of solidarity and support and could share their experiences and like sometimes even find humor in it, even though like these things were scary for them at the time. I think that laughing at your OCD is a really great way to kind of take some of the power out of it and maybe like separate it from your sense of self. This has really turned into too much of me talking about OCD probably for a movie review. So I'm gonna wrap this up actually um, soon. But yeah, I thought that the film did that really, really well. I thought the film kind of portrayed like the main character's anxiety, Cooper's anxiety in a good way. I thought Daniel Dore did a great job as Cooper. Um, so yeah, that's my thoughts on the OCD portion of the film. To kind of talk about the film more broadly, I think that it did a really good job creating a lot of believable and complicated, loving relationships. There was a lot of gentleness in the film, even if there wasn't any in the therapist's approach, in my mind. It explored a lot of kind of big life events and the fallouts of those in a way that was generous to the characters. I thought, like, I don't know, I liked the way the film handled a lot of difficult topics, with a lot of nuance and compassion. And I think it was a really, really, um, just a really thoughtful portrayal of family and relationship dynamics between, Cooper and the people that he's counseling at the rehab. So I really loved those aspects. And I didn't think that it was a super predictable film either, which I like. Like some of the main plot points I saw coming, some of them I was really kind of like surprised by the way that they turned out. And I thought that was really kind of fresh. I did think that some of the side characters were not the best actors ever. That threw me off a little bit at the beginning, but I really think that as the movie went on and I became more invested in Cooper, that I could really kind of buy into the world and feel more involved with everything that was going around with him. I definitely teared up multiple times throughout the film. It hit me on the heartstrings, and I don't think you have to have OCD by any means to feel kind of the emotional impact of this film and look into the relationships and the nuances that are there. So I really liked that. Oh, one more thing. Every time a character sweared, I thought it was really unnatural. That was one thing though. I was like, you guys should not be swearing. It sounds a little off. Um, but yeah, I loved the film overall. Once we got to kind of the second half, I thought it was really great. First half, I kind of had to get more into it, I think. Um, and yeah, I think that it did a pretty overall sensitive and nice and like good portrayal of someone with OCD. But again, there's not one way to be like, oh, this is a good portrayal of OCD. This is a bad one because it's a really, there's like such a spectrum of OCD. There's so many different ways that it can affect people, not infect, sorry, affect people. So yeah, I thought I'd wrap this up by just talking about there's a scene where some characters just kind of have a scary moment because of the OCD, where they're just really stressed out. And then after they're able to laugh at it, which I thought, again, was really powerful. I think laughter is a great treatment for OCD. So I'm going to tell kind of one of my most ridiculous OCD related stories. This is from when I was a little kid. I wouldn't do this now, I hope. But one day when I was young and definitely kind of suffering with like the awakening of my OCD, even though I had no idea at the time because I didn't know really what OCD was until I was in high school and didn't realize I had it myself until I was in university. Um, but I was watching Victorious on my iPod Touch in my room with my headphones on, and my dad and my little sister were hanging out downstairs just watching TV in the basement. And at some point on the TV show, there was like the sound of a door opening and closing, and I was very paranoid. Like I kind of mentioned earlier that maybe I didn't mention that earlier. I was very paranoid that I was going to be murdered, that someone was going to break in the house and murder me. That was something I freaked out about all the time. So I was constantly checking if the doors were locked, checking if the alarm was on. And I'm sure I'd already checked if the door was locked that night. I'm sure it wasn't, I'm sure it was not unlocked. But in my headphones, I heard a sound of a door closing. And so I thought, oh my God, someone just opened the door. But I knew that my dad and my sister were downstairs. So it was like, we are being broken into. Someone is breaking into our house. So I took my headphones out and I really silently tiptoed to my door to see if I could like peek out and assess the situation. And as I went to turn the handle, because I was so scared and like shaking with fear, I didn't grasp onto it tightly enough to turn it. So in my head, my freaked out paranoid head, someone was holding the doorknob on the other side of the door so that I couldn't get out of my room. At that point, I freaked out. So I ran to the other side of my room, opened my window. Thank God my bedroom was on the first floor. And I jumped out the window to escape the imaginary attacker that I was so convinced was right on the other side of my door. And it was not summer when this happened. It was fall. The ground was very cold on my bare feet. And I got out and then I looked around and I was like, oh, well, I don't see any cars and I don't see any people here. So I was like, what's going on now? And I couldn't really climb back in through my window because it's higher off the ground than it is on the inside floor. So I kind of crept towards our front door and peeked in and saw that, oh, the alarm is on. So no one could have come in, like, oh, silly me. So I knocked on the door. It was late by this time. It was probably like 9 or 9:30, which was late for us at the time because I was probably like 9 or 10. And I knocked on the door and my dad didn't come upstairs because he was probably like, who is knocking on the door at 9 o'clock? I'm not gonna answer that. And then as I continued to wait, I was getting colder and a little anxious again. And so I was banging on the door and like kind of trying to shake it and like freaking out. And then my dad, I could see from like the little gap in the curtain and the bottom of the door window, peeked through. I could see my dad crawling up, coming up the stairs a little cautiously, like what is going on. And then he saw, my little 10-year-old face peeked up against the glass like this, and he was like, what the hell? And he came over and he opened the door and he got so mad at me because I had made my little sister, who was maybe 4 at the time, cry downstairs because she was so scared because in imagining that there is attackers in the house and freaking out about it, I essentially became the attacker on the house and instilled a much more rational fear and my dad and sister by like trying to barge in. So anyways, I was in trouble for that. Looking back on it, it's funny and ridiculous, and I feel a little bad for young me, but you know what? None of us knew anything about OCD at the time. No one had any clue, and it didn't scar or traumatize me or my sister. We kind of just like it was just like something I did and got in trouble about, and then I forgot about it for years. But that is my ridiculous look what my OCD made me do story. I hope people enjoyed it. If you can relate to it, nice. We're in this together. And I think you should probably check out Pure O. Maybe make sure that there's nothing in it that might trigger you. Because I do think that I might have had a little bit of difficulty watching this film. I probably should have said this at the beginning. I think I might have had a little bit of difficulty watching this film when my OCD was at its very worst a few years ago. I think it might have gave me a lot of anxiety, but at the same time, I would have survived that anxiety. So up to you at your discretion if you think you're ready to watch this film, but I think it's great. I would totally recommend it. I think it was cathartic in a lot of ways to watch. I wouldn't say it's my top film of the year, but I thought there was so much warmth and so much love in it. If you're interested in OCD, I think it's super interesting. Um, and yeah, that is what I have to say about Pure O. Check it out. And yeah, I will talk to everyone soon.